So there are some common challenges when we talk about APIs. One is, and we're going to drop this down to our level. And so when I say our level, I mean the day-to-day users of some of these APIs. And I'll use Calendly as an example. When I authorize Calendly to access my system, I don't want Calendly itself to know my specific meeting, who I'm meeting with, what the topic is, what the location is. I just want them to look at free busy. Basically, am I free that time or am I busy that time? I don't need them or want them to see the data because they did, number one, don't need to know it and it might be confidential.
Sure.
If I don't program it properly, right, it can access multiple pieces of information. And then we think of read versus write access. So we got to make sure we're being very careful. Anytime we leverage an API or connect software together, that we're really paying attention to the level of access they'll have to the new system or the old system, I guess I should say. So what it can see, make sure we're really reading that description to understand what it can do for you. Next is that modification. What can it change? Because at the end of the day, like to use this Calendly example, or even our Google Flights example, I need to be able to book a seat on that flight, or I need to be able to book a meeting with Chuck. But I also don't want to push too much information or be able to change other things. I don't want to overwrite a meeting he already has just because I could have the ability to do that. And with an API, I could write the code to overwrite that information. As long as Chuck accepts it, it would do that. So we have to be
Yep.
careful what it can modify. The big one, right? Those first two are, I guess they're all big ones, right? Because we don't want it to see too much. We don't want it to change too much. And then we have that tunnel. And if we think of, your virtual private network that we probably still use today to access sensitive information or get to your office and read data, run applications, we talk a lot about the encryption levels, the authentication of that channel. APIs have to do that with every connection, every single time to make sure that is completely encrypted. Because if I got in the middle of that API, just like our social engineering, if I get in the middle of the attack, I can see everything. So we want to make sure that nobody can ever get in the middle of our API calls. That would be very dangerous. And again,
Hmm.
they would be able to capture all that information and change it. And that last piece is access. And this is the hardest one to understand because we're trusting, again, we'll use Calendly as our example. We're trusting that Calendly is only going to see what they need to see, only change what they need to change, and it's going to be a secure connection all the time. What we will probably never know is which employees at Calendly have access to the code and have access to troubleshoot the API. So
Mm-hmm.
in smaller organizations, a lot of times we'll do business to business connections. And this could be in our QuickBooks, in our ERP, in our ordering system. And we know that our team that has access to the code and the connection, we want to make sure we understand on the other side who has access to the code and connection. We'll dig into how to fix this or how to protect it in just a second. But these are really the big four. What can it see? What can it change? Is the connection secure between the two? And who has access to change anything? A bad example, which we don't like to talk about, is I'm on the other end of an API between our ConnectWise and one-to-one. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to modify the code a little bit so I can see a little more. And if you trust me too much, Chuck, I could start seeing that data, right? So you want to
Yeah,
be able
for
to
sure.
restrict that connection as well.